We start with breaking news. Russian Defense Minister Andrei Belousov just said that in May the enemy lost more than 35,000 soldiers and more than 290 tanks and armored fighting vehicles, including 4 American Abrams tanks. The Russian military the day before repelled a massive attack with 10 ATACMS missiles on the Crimean Bridge, as Belousov said. In 2024, 880 square kilometers of territory came under the control of the Russian army. In the Kharkiv region, the Ukrainians have already retreated 9 kilometers back, and the movement of the Russian army continues. These footages were taken south of the outskirts of Volchansk, where the last Ukrainian units are now crowded. All Ukrainian counterattacks here failed. And as you can see in the video, the situation in Ukraine is bleak. But Zelensky and his generals ordered their soldiers to hold the city at all costs. Well, that is, they are simply burying their best reserves. This is what Chasiv Yar looks like. The Russians are launching endless, destructive, deadly airstrikes against the enemy garrison. At the same time, the Kyiv regime continues to tighten the screws of mobilization. From today, a summons to the military registration and enlistment office will be considered served even if the citizen is not at the address indicated at the military registration and enlistment office, and even if he did not physically receive this summons. Problems also await the Ukrainian guys who managed to escape abroad. Once they turn 17, they will now also begin to receive summonses to register for military service. This cannot be done remotely, so they will have to return to Ukraine. But so far, on the contrary, people are only fleeing from Ukraine. The day before, 4 evaders were detained while trying to swim across the Tisa River on children's inflatable rings. They paid $4,000 each for the service of escaping from Ukraine, but they were unable to cross to Romania. The Tisa River itself, or the River of Death, as they now call it, is guarded by Zelensky's border troops around the clock. The day before, the 10th drowned fugitive was caught from this river. And inside Ukraine, the military, together with the police, continue to catch men in crowded places, in shops, and even on the roads. There are roadblocks there. This is a fresh video from the city of Kharkiv. 3 strong military men forcibly drag a man onto a bus, and from there they will send him to the front, where the Kyiv regime is sorely lacking in manpower. Now only a month and a half is allotted for training, which means they are throwing unprepared soldiers into the fire. But the Minister of Defense of Ukraine with the telling surname Umerov informed the head of the Pentagon, Lloyd Austin, about positive trends in mobilization and the positive dynamics of the restoration of combat brigades. Commander-in-Chief of Ukraine Syrskyi confirmed this information. The new task from Washington is to lower the draft age to 18 years. And a direct war between Russia and the United States is getting closer and closer. Biden, as we expected, gave Ukraine permission to carry out strikes with American weapons deep into the territory of our country. The secret of Polykanel is revealed today by Politico. Well, that is, Washington is aiming missiles at our country, and this is the first time it has admitted this. The White House confirmed this information. Ukrainians are now allowed to use American missiles to strike the Belgorod region of Russia. The New York Times writes that the Pentagon is right now developing precise instructions. They are drawing maps for Ukrainian militants that will mark legal targets for American missiles. General Christopher Kovally, commander of NATO forces in Europe, is doing this on the personal instructions of U.S. Secretary of Defense Austin. The details are already there too. Ukrainians can strike Russian missile batteries, shoot down Russian aircraft in Russian airspace, strike Russian artillery batteries, command posts, ammunition depots, military equipment and Russian troops in the Belgorod region. To understand, of course, Moscow is aware that Ukraine is not able to independently use either the American ATACMS missiles or the British Storm Shadow, or the French Scalp missiles. All flight missions are issued by the owners of these missiles, by NATO, that is, the Americans, British and French. In general, there really are no more red lines. Right now, Russia needs to think about its response options. At least 3 options arise. This is a missile strike on the main NATO logistics hub in the Polish city of Rzeszów. This is the destruction of NATO drones and reconnaissance aircraft that correct missile attacks, not only over the neutral waters of the Black Sea, but, for example, in the airspace of Romania. Well, and this is the deployment of a group of troops in Belarus. Of course, there are also tactical nuclear weapons, but, as you understand, this is a last resort. Although, unfortunately, at this rate we will reach this extreme case quite quickly. The Biden administration has quietly allowed Ukraine to launch strikes on Russian territory using US-provided weapons, but only in the Kharkiv area. This was announced on Thursday by 3 US officials and 2 other people familiar with the work. And this is a major turnaround that will help Ukraine better protect its second-largest city. The US president recently directed his team to make sure Ukraine can use US weapons to return fire in Kharkiv to retaliate against Russian forces that are attacking or preparing to attack them, one US official said. At the same time, he noted that the policy of banning long-range strikes on Russian territory has not changed. Essentially, Ukraine can now use American missiles and missile launchers to shoot down Russian missiles launched towards Kharkiv. They can be used against troops amassed on the border with Russia, not far from the city, or against Russian aircraft at the moment of launching bombs into Ukrainian territory. However, according to the official, Ukraine should not use these weapons to strike civilian infrastructure. It is also prohibited from launching long-range missiles such as ATACMS to strike military targets deep inside Russia. Interesting news came out today. At the June summit, NATO will put support for Ukraine on a stronger foundation, as stated by NATO Secretary General Stoltenberg. That is, if before this the foundation was apparently made of dried manure, now it will be made of wood. And in another year they will put Ukraine on a reinforced concrete foundation, and then, perhaps, a roof will appear. The main thing is to believe. Deputy Prime Minister for European Integration of Ukraine Stefan Ashina said that the decision of the NATO summit will contain a specific position on the irreversibility of Ukraine's membership in the alliance. That is, this is already some kind of incurable diagnosis. After all, the day before, in case anyone forgot, NATO directly asked Zelensky to take off his rose-colored glasses, calm down and shut up, and, at least for the next year, not raise the issue of inviting Ukraine to NATO. The Frenchman was also furious. President Macron may announce the sending of French military instructors to Ukraine in the coming week, Reuters reports. Paris can supposedly afford to take such steps because Paris has nuclear deterrent forces. Naturally, Kyiv warmly supported this decision in these loud words. Rumor has it that they are already preparing barracks for French soldiers. Macron wants to extend his crazy idea not only to the French army. Emmanuel dreams of creating an entire European coalition to send military instructors, as the newspaper Le Monde writes. A corresponding decision may be made in the near future and announced during Zelensky's visit on the occasion of the 80th anniversary of the Allied landing in Normandy. Among those who could join Macron's idea may be Lithuania, Estonia and the UK. This is the most ridiculous policy. They say that the main thing is to prevent escalation, but they are doing everything so that later they will have to intervene in Ukraine. European NATO members have been preparing to fight the Russians for a very long time. Romania, which borders Ukraine, for example, has the alliance's largest military base on its eastern flank. There, the ubiquitous French, together with the Romanians, Belgians, and Portuguese, train in conditions close to Ukrainian conditions. in case of a direct armed conflict with the Russian army. They even brought 13 Leclerc tanks there. And they are conducting shooting there. At the same time, they accuse Russia of militarizing its borders, for example, just as happened in Kaliningrad after the outbreak of the Ukrainian conflict. Given the belligerence of our NATO neighbors, we would be foolish not to turn the Russian enclave in the Baltic into a bastion.